The sun rose over Rollins Family Farm, casting long shadows across acres of thriving organic crops. James Rollins stood at the edge of his property, weathered hands resting on the fence his grandfather had built 60 years ago. At 45, James carried the weight of generations in his shoulders. 3 generations of black farmers who had transformed unwanted land into one of the most successful organic operations in the Southeast. My grandfather started with 5 acres during the Great Migration, James often told visitors. Land nobody wanted. Sandy soil they said wouldn't grow anything but despair. But the Rollins family had proven them wrong. Through relentless innovation, community building, and sheer determination, they had expanded to over 2,000 acres of certified organic farmland. James had taken his grandfather's and father's legacy and revolutionized it, implementing regenerative farming practices, establishing a robust CSA program, and creating the largest black-owned organic seed bank in the country. This morning, though, James's mind wasn't on the crops or the morning harvest. His thoughts were occupied by the meeting scheduled for later that day, a meeting that represented the culmination of years of planning and hard work. "You sure about this?" The voice belonged to Darius, James's younger brother and business partner, who approached with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. James accepted one, inhaling the rich aroma before responding. "Never been more sure of anything in my life." Darius leaned against the fence, his eyes scanning the horizon. At 40, he handled the technological and logistical aspects of their operation with the same precision James brought to the fields. "Just making sure. It's a big step." "It's the necessary step," James replied. "We've hit the ceiling with our regional distribution. To get our products into the national market, we need to move faster. The jet isn't just a purchase, it's infrastructure." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Maya, James's 19-year-old daughter, who was home from college for the summer. She moved with purpose, her braids swinging as she approached. "The team's ready for the morning briefing," she said, her eyes bright with the same determination that had carried the Rollins family through decades of challenges. "And Mom wants to know if you remembered to take the proposal package." James patted his messenger bag. "Got it right here. Everything we've been working on for the past year." The 3 of them walked toward the main house, a beautiful farmhouse that had been expanded and modernized over the years. Inside, the kitchen bustled with activity as family members and key employees gathered for the daily meeting. Amara, James's wife of 22 years and the farm's financial strategist, stood at the head of the table. Her keen business acumen had been instrumental in transforming the farm from a successful local operation to a thriving enterprise with national ambitions. "Everyone ready for today?" she asked, her eyes finding James's across the room. "As ready as we'll ever be," he replied, settling into his chair. The meeting proceeded with the usual efficiency. Harvest reports, distribution updates, and the day's schedule were covered. But beneath the ordinary business, there was a current of excitement. Everyone knew that today marked a potential turning point. As the meeting dispersed, Amara pulled James aside. "The bank called to confirm the wire transfer is ready. Once you sign the papers, they'll release the funds." James nodded. "Perfect. And remember," she added, her voice dropping, "you're not just buying a jet. You're making a statement about what's possible." 3 hours later, James and Darius arrived at Piedmont Executive Aviation, a high-end private jet dealer that catered to corporations and wealthy individuals. The brothers had traded their work clothes for tailored suits, though James still wore his trademark work boots, a reminder of where he came from. "Mr. Rollins?" A receptionist greeted them, her smile faltering slightly as she took in their appearance. "Mr. Westfield is expecting you. If you'll follow me." They were led through a showroom displaying scale models of various aircraft before reaching a conference room. The door opened to reveal Bradley Westfield, a man in his 50s with the confident demeanor of someone who had spent his career selling luxury items to the wealthy. "Gentlemen," Westfield said, extending his hand. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Piedmont. I understand you're interested in our pre-owned Citation CJ3. "That's correct," James replied, taking a seat. "We've reviewed the specifications and maintenance records. It meets our needs." Westfield nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. It's a wonderful aircraft. Very popular with our corporate clients. But I feel I should mention that we have some more accessible options that might better suit your situation. Darius stiffened, but James remained calm. Our situation. Well, Westfield continued, shuffling some papers. The CJ3 is a significant investment. The operating costs alone can be substantial. Perhaps a fractional ownership arrangement would be more appropriate. James opened his messenger bag, removing a thick folder. Our financial package, complete with bank statements, profit projections, and a letter of credit from First National Bank for the full purchase amount. Westfield glanced at the documents, his expression unchanged. I see. Well, purchasing a jet isn't like buying a truck, Mr. Rollins. There are considerations beyond just a price tag. We're well aware, James replied. We've already arranged hangar space at the regional airport and hired a certified pilot. We've also completed all the necessary paperwork for FAA registration. Westfield leaned forward. May I ask what a farming operation needs with a private jet? The question hung in the air, laden with unspoken assumptions. James felt a familiar tension building in his chest, the same tension he'd felt countless times when confronted with people who couldn't see beyond their preconceptions. Distribution, James answered simply. We supply organic produce to restaurants and specialty markets across the Southeast. Time is essential in our business. The fresher the produce, the higher the value. Westfield responded, clearly unconvinced. And you're certain you wouldn't prefer something more basic? Perhaps a small turboprop? Darius finally spoke, his voice controlled but firm. We've done our research, Mr. Westfield. The Citation CJ3 meets our specific needs for range, cargo capacity, and landing capabilities. We're not interested in alternatives. Westfield's smile tightened. Of course. I just find it unusual for farmers to be in the market for a multimillion-dollar jet. Not just farmers, James corrected. Business owners, with a multimillion-dollar operation that supplies organic produce to over 500 restaurants and specialty markets across 12 states. A tense silence filled the room. Westfield finally gathered the financial documents and stood. I'll need to verify these. If you'll excuse me. As the door closed behind him, Darius exhaled sharply. Same old story. James nodded, his expression resolute. But this time, the ending's going to be different. James Rollins sat straight-backed in the plush conference room, his expression carefully neutral as he and Darius waited for Westfield's return. The walls were lined with photographs of satisfied customers, all white, standing proudly beside their aircraft. The subtle message wasn't lost on either brother. Remember when Dad tried to get that equipment loan in '95? Darius murmured, his voice low enough that only James could hear. James nodded, a memory surfacing of their father, dignified in his only suit, being told that perhaps he should consider something more appropriate for his operation than the state-of-the-art tractor he'd sought to purchase. Some things change, James replied. Others stay the same. The door opened, and Westfield returned with another man, older, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone who made important decisions. Mr. Rollins, Westfield said, his tone suddenly formal. This is Richard Hargrove, our general manager. Hargrove extended his hand, his grip firm. Gentlemen, I understand there's some confusion about your interest in our Citation CJ3. James met his gaze evenly. No confusion on our part, Mr. Hargrove. We've done our research, secured financing, and are prepared to make the purchase today. Hargrove exchanged a look with Westfield before taking a seat. I've reviewed your financial package. It's impressive. However, I'm concerned about the suitability of this particular aircraft for your needs. Our needs, James repeated, his voice remaining level, though his jaw tightened. Yes, Hargrove continued. Private aviation is a complex world with significant ongoing expenses. The Citation CJ3 requires specialized maintenance, storage, and operational expertise. We have a responsibility to ensure our clients make informed decisions. Darius leaned forward. With all due respect, Mr. Hargrove, we didn't come here for financial advice. We came to purchase an aircraft that meets specifications we've carefully researched. Hargrove's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, but you must understand that we have a reputation to uphold. Our clients expect a certain standard. The implication hung in the air. James felt a familiar heat rising in his chest, the same burning indignation he'd felt countless times before when faced with the subtle, insidious nature of modern discrimination. Not the overt racism his grandfather had faced, but something more calculated, more deniable. Mr. Hargrove, James said, his voice steady. I believe we may be talking past each other. Let me be clear. Rollins Family Farms is a $50 million operation with distribution contracts across 12 states. We're not hobbyists or dreamers. We're business owners making a strategic investment in our logistics infrastructure. Before Hargrove could respond, the conference room door opened again. A young woman in a crisp suit entered, tablet in hand. She hesitated when she saw the tension in the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hargrove, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention. Hargrove excused himself, leaving the brothers with Westfield, who sat uncomfortably shuffling papers. Perhaps we should reschedule, Westfield suggested, given the complexity of your request. James exchanged a look with Darius. They had anticipated resistance, planned for it. Now it was time to implement the next phase of their strategy. No need, James replied, pulling out his phone. I just need to make a quick call. He stepped outside the conference room, dialing a number he'd prepared in advance. On the third ring, a familiar voice answered. James, how's it going? About as expected, Marcus, James replied, speaking to Marcus Washington, his college roommate, and now a prominent business reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Seems they're having trouble believing black farmers might need a jet. Marcus's laugh was short and knowing. Their loss. Cumberland Aviation would be happy to have your business. Should I let them know you're coming? Not yet, James said. Let's see how Plan B plays out first. Back in the conference room, James resumed his seat, just as Hargrove returned, now accompanied by an older man in his 70s, Charles Piedmont himself, the company's founder and CEO. Mr. Rollins, Piedmont said, extending his hand. I understand there's been some confusion. Richard tells me you're interested in our Citation CJ3. James shook his hand. That's correct, Mr. Piedmont, though your team seems to have concerns about whether it's appropriate for us. Piedmont's eyes narrowed slightly. I see. Well, I try to stay out of the day-to-day operations these days, but I was passing through and thought I'd introduce myself. Tell me about your operation. Something in the older man's direct gaze made James decide to be equally direct. He pulled out his tablet and opened a presentation he'd prepared. Rollins Family Farms, founded by my grandfather in 1952 with 5 acres. Today, we operate over 2,000 acres of certified organic farmland. We supply fresh produce to high-end restaurants and specialty markets across the Southeast. Our annual revenue exceeds $50 million, with a growth rate of 15% year-over-year for the past decade. He swiped to the next slide, showing a map of their distribution network. Our current logistics rely on trucking, which limits our reach and the freshness of our products. The Citation CJ3 would allow us to deliver to markets as far as Chicago and New York within hours of harvest, opening up premium markets willing to pay top dollar for truly fresh organic produce. Piedmont studied the presentation, his expression thoughtful. Interesting approach. Farm to table via private jet. Can't say I've heard that one before. Innovation is how we've survived and thrived, James replied. My grandfather had to innovate to make poor soil productive. My father had to innovate during the farm crisis of the 80s. This is our generation's innovation. Piedmont nodded slowly. And the financing? Secured, James said. We've been working with First National for 2 decades. They understand our business model and growth strategy. The older man turned to Hargrove and Westfield. Gentlemen, would you excuse us? I'd like to speak with the Rollins brothers privately. When they were alone, Piedmont's demeanor changed subtly. I apologize for the reception you've received. Old habits die hard in this industry. James measured his response carefully. We're used to proving ourselves, Mr. Piedmont. Been doing it for 3 generations. I imagine so, Piedmont replied. My father was a mechanic who couldn't get a loan to start his repair shop. Had to work out of our garage for years before a banker finally took a chance on him. He leaned back in his chair, studying the brothers. Not the same struggle, I know, but I recognize determination when I see it. He paused. That call you made, I'm guessing it wasn't just to check in with the office. James met his gaze steadily. Plan B. Cumberland Aviation has a similar aircraft. Their sales team has been more receptive to our business. Piedmont nodded. Smart. Always have leverage. He stood, extending his hand. Mr. Rollins, I believe we can do business. No more confusion, no more concerns about suitability. If you're ready to purchase the Citation CJ3, we're ready to sell it to you. James stood as well, taking the offered hand. And the price? The listed price. No games, no additional fees. Just a straightforward business transaction between professionals. As they shook hands, James felt a weight lift. Not just the tension of this encounter, but something deeper. Another barrier broken, another ceiling shattered. Not just for himself, but for his daughter Maya, for the next generation of black farmers and entrepreneurs who would face their own challenges. We have a deal, James said, his voice firm with the certainty that comes from knowing your worth and standing your ground. News travels fast in tight-knit communities. By evening, James' phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications, text messages, voicemails, and social media alerts from friends, family members, and fellow black farmers across the Southeast. Word's getting out, Amara observed as she joined James on the farmhouse porch. The evening sky painted their land in shades of amber and gold. She handed him a glass of sweet tea, settling beside him on the porch swing that had witnessed 3 generations of Rollins family triumphs and tribulations. James scrolled through his messages. Marcus works fast. The Wall Street Journal reporter hadn't published a formal article. That would come later, but he'd shared a brief, pointed update on social media. Just heard about a $50 million black-owned organic farm expanding distribution via private jet. Some companies questioned their suitability as jet owners. Others recognized a solid business opportunity. Guess which approach wins in 2025? Hashtag innovation has no color. The post had already been shared thousands of times. You didn't ask him to do that, Amara noted. Not really a question. No, James replied, setting down his phone. But he understands what we're up against. Always has. They sat in comfortable silence, the porch swing creaking gently beneath them. James reflected on the day's events, not just the confrontation at Piedmont Aviation, but what had come after. Once the agreement was finalized, Charles Piedmont had personally given them a tour of the Citation CJ3. The aircraft, sleek, powerful, precisely engineered, represented more than just a business asset. It symbolized a breakthrough, another crack in a ceiling that had constrained black agricultural entrepreneurs for generations. You were thinking about your grandfather, Amara said softly, reading his expression with the ease that comes from decades of partnership. James nodded. He fought so hard just to hold onto those first 5 acres. Never even dreamed of flying commercial, let alone owning a jet. He dreamed of freedom, Amara corrected gently. Freedom to build something that would last, that would grow. You're just expanding that dream. The screen door opened as Maya stepped out onto the porch, her expression animated. Dad, you're trending. She held out her phone, showing them social media posts about James and the farm. Some shared Marcus's post, while others added their own commentary. This is why representation matters in every industry, and black farmers have always innovated against the odds. And wait till you hear what they're doing with this jet. Game-changing for local food systems. I didn't do this for attention, James said, uncomfortable with the spotlight. Maya sat cross-legged on the porch, looking up at her parents. Maybe not, but people need these stories, Dad. Do you know how many of my friends think farming isn't for us? How many believe technology and innovation belong to everyone but us? Her words hung in the warm evening air, weighty with truth. The perception that Black Americans didn't belong in certain spaces, farming, aviation, high-end technology, wasn't just harmful stereotyping. It was a narrative that limited horizons, constrained dreams, and perpetuated systemic inequities. "Your daughter has a point," came Darius's voice as he joined them, tablet in hand. "And it's not just social media. Check your email." James reached for his phone again, opening his inbox to find dozens of new messages. Farm-to-table restaurant owners from Chicago, New York, and Boston expressing interest in their produce. A prominent chef wanting to feature Rollins Family Farms in a documentary about sustainable food systems. 3 agricultural technology startups proposing partnerships. And most surprisingly, an email from Richard Hargrove at Piedmont Aviation. "Mr. Rollins, I wish to extend my sincere apologies for my conduct during our meeting today. My assumptions were unfounded and unprofessional. Mr. Piedmont has helped me recognize the bias in my approach, and I am committed to doing better. If you're willing, I would value the opportunity to learn more about your operation and how aviation can support agricultural innovation. Perhaps a tour of your farm would be educational for our team as we seek to better understand the diverse needs of potential clients. Respectfully, Richard Hargrove." James read the email aloud, then looked up at his family's surprised expressions. "Are you going to respond?" Darius asked, his tone skeptical. James considered the question carefully. "Yes, but not tonight." "What will you say?" Maya pressed. "That he's welcome to visit. That education requires openness and humility. That our farm has always had its doors open to those genuinely seeking to learn." Amara squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting understanding of what wasn't being said. That Black Americans had always shouldered the additional burden of educating others about their humanity, their capabilities, their right to exist in spaces not designed for them. "It's not fair that it falls on you," she said softly. "No," James agreed. "But change rarely happens without discomfort. Sometimes being visible is itself an act of resistance." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Johnson, their 84-year-old neighbor who had been a contemporary of James's grandfather. He moved slowly up the porch steps, supported by a handcrafted walking stick, but his eyes remained sharp and perceptive. "Evening, Rollins family," he greeted them, accepting the chair Darius offered. "Heard you made quite a stir today." James smiled. "News travels fast." "Always has," Elder Johnson replied, settling into the chair. "Your grandfather would be proud, not just of what you've built, but how you've built it." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. Elder Johnson's weathered hands rested on his walking stick, his gaze distant with memory. "Your great-grandfather understood something essential, that progress isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about who you bring with you." He gestured toward the fields. When he started making this land produce, he didn't keep his methods secret. He shared them with every Black farmer who asked. When banks wouldn't lend to us, he helped establish that lending circle that kept 3 families from losing their land. James nodded, familiar with these stories that formed the cornerstone of their family's ethos. Community resilience. "Exactly," Elder Johnson affirmed. "And now you've got this jet. It's not just a symbol of your success. It's infrastructure, like you've been saying. The question is, who benefits from this infrastructure beyond just Rollins Family Farms?" The question lingered in the gathering dusk, challenging and profound. James had been so focused on securing the aircraft, on overcoming the immediate barriers, that he hadn't fully articulated this larger vision, even to himself. "I've been thinking about that," Darius interjected, turning his tablet toward the group. On the screen was a rough draft of a new initiative, the Southern Black Farmers Cooperative Logistics Network. "The idea is simple," he explained. "We're not the only Black farmers producing high-quality organic goods, but we're one of the few with the capital and now the infrastructure to reach premium markets quickly." He swiped to the next screen, showing a map of Black-owned farms across the Southeast. "What if our jet doesn't just carry Rollins products? What if we create a cooperative shipping network? Smaller farms could aggregate their produce with ours, reaching markets they couldn't access independently." Maya's eyes lit up. And we could create a unified brand. Southern Heritage Organics, or something similar. Each farm maintains its identity, but together we have more market power. The cooperative model, Elder Johnson murmured, nodding slowly. Coming full circle. That's how we survived after emancipation. Pooling resources, skills, knowledge. Amara, ever the financial strategist, was already calculating. It could work. We'd need to establish clear agreements, quality standards, cost-sharing structures. But the economic benefits could be substantial for everyone involved. James listened, feeling a familiar sense of purpose crystallizing. This was how progress had always happened in their community. Not through individual achievement alone, but through collective advancement, through building systems that lifted many rather than just a few. Tomorrow, he said finally, after the jet paperwork is complete, let's start reaching out. We'll need to bring together at least a dozen farms to make this viable. I can help identify potential partners, Elder Johnson offered. Still know most every black farming family in 3 counties. As the conversation flowed into the practicalities of implementation, James felt a profound sense of alignment between past and present, between individual success and collective responsibility. The jet, initially just a business asset, was transforming into something more significant, a vehicle not just for produce, but for possibility. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, James sat alone in his study, crafting an email to Richard Hargrove. His response was gracious but direct, accepting the apology while also extending an invitation. Mr. Hargrove, thank you for your email. I accept your apology and welcome your interest in learning more about our operation. If you'd like to visit, we're planning an open house next month to announce a new initiative that may help you understand why that citation CJ3 represents more than just a luxury purchase for us. It's a vital link in a community infrastructure that has been generations in the making. Sometimes, the most innovative solutions come from communities that have had to create their own paths forward. We'd be happy to share some of what we've learned along the way. Regards, James Rollins. He sent the email, then turned to the family photo on his desk. 4 generations of Rollins farmers, from his grandfather to Maya. Each had faced different barriers, different manifestations of the same systemic challenges. Each had found ways to not just survive, but to create viable futures. The jet was just the latest chapter in that ongoing story of innovation against the odds. But what truly mattered wasn't the aircraft itself. It was how they would use it to redefine what was possible, not just for themselves, but for a community that had been told for too long what they couldn't do, where they didn't belong. Tomorrow, they would begin that work. 3 months later, the gentle hum of conversations filled the main barn at Rollins Family Farm. The space, usually home to equipment maintenance and seed storage, had been transformed for today's gathering. Long tables fashioned from reclaimed wood held displays of vibrant produce. Enlarged photographs showcased the faces and lands of the 12 farming families who had joined the Southern Black Farmers Cooperative Logistics Network. Near the entrance, a digital screen displayed a real-time map tracking the citation CJ3, now emblazoned with the cooperative's logo, as it completed its 3rd delivery run of the week. James stood slightly apart from the crowd, taking in the scene with quiet satisfaction. What had begun as a personal business decision had evolved into something far more profound. In just 3 months, the cooperative had secured contracts with premier restaurants and specialty markets in Chicago, New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. The jet, now named Legacy, had become a vital artery, connecting historically marginalized producers with markets previously beyond reach. Quite a turnout, observed Marcus Washington, the Wall Street Journal reporter who had helped bring national attention to their story. His feature article, titled Flying Against Headwinds, How Black Farmers Are Revolutionizing Farm-to-Table Logistics, had sparked discussions throughout the agricultural and business sectors. James nodded. More than we expected. The gathering included a diverse array of attendees: local farming families, regional restaurant owners, agricultural extension officers, several state officials, and even a representative from the USDA. Most surprisingly, a delegation from Piedmont Aviation had accepted his invitation, including Charles Piedmont and Richard Hargrove. Your story resonated with people, Marcus remarked. It's not just about a black farmer buying a jet. It's about reimagining what's possible. That's what my grandfather always said farming was about, James replied. Imagination made visible, looking at a field others called worthless and seeing potential. Their conversation was interrupted as Maya approached, accompanied by a group of agriculture students from her university. Young people of diverse backgrounds united by their interest in sustainable farming practices. "Dad," she said, eyes bright with the enthusiasm that always energized James. "These are the students I told you about. They've been studying our cooperative model for their agricultural economics class." James greeted the students warmly, noting their eagerness. One young woman, her hair styled in locks similar to Maya's, stepped forward. "Mr. Rollins, your approach challenges everything we've been taught about agricultural scaling," she said. "Most of our textbooks present only two viable models: massive industrial operations or small boutique farms serving local markets. You've created something that doesn't fit either category." James recognized in her the same questioning spirit he'd encouraged in Maya. "Sometimes the most innovative solutions emerge when you stop trying to fit existing models," he replied. "Instead, ask what serves the actual needs of your community." "But how did you overcome the capital barriers?" another student asked. "Black farmers historically have had limited access to financing." "Those barriers are real," James acknowledged, not sugarcoating the challenges. "We built this operation over 3 generations, reinvesting every profit, leveraging every program available to us, and yes, sometimes having to work twice as hard to prove we were half as worthy of investment." He gestured toward Darius, who was leading a tour of their seed bank for another group. "But we also recognized that collective knowledge is capital too. When traditional financing wasn't available, we found other resources: skill sharing, equipment co-ops, seed exchanges. The JET and this cooperative are just modern extensions of survival strategies our community has used for generations." The students nodded, taking notes. Maya beamed with pride as she observed her father's natural teaching ability, his gift for distilling complex realities into accessible wisdom without diminishing their challenges. "You should come speak at our symposium next month," one student suggested. "Our department is discussing the future of small and mid-sized farming operations." Before James could respond, Amara's voice came over the sound system, calling everyone's attention to the central platform, where she stood with Elder Johnson and representatives from each participating farm. "Welcome, everyone, to the official launch of the Southern Black Farmers Cooperative Logistics Network," she began, her professional demeanor balanced by genuine warmth. "What began as a simple business acquisition has grown into something much more significant, a reimagining of what's possible when we combine traditional agricultural knowledge with modern logistics." She introduced each participating farmer, highlighting their specialties: heirloom vegetables from the Williamson family, heritage grains from the Douglas farm, honey and tree fruits from the Johnsons. As each farmer was acknowledged, their pride was palpable, not just in their products, but in being part of a collective that amplified their individual efforts. Elder Johnson spoke next, his voice weathered but commanding. "I've been farming these lands for 70 years, he began. "Seen technologies come and go, seen policies that helped us, and those that hurt us. But I've never seen anything quite like this." He gestured toward the screen, showing the jet's flight path. "That aircraft isn't just carrying vegetables. It's carrying forward the dreams of folks who were told what they couldn't do, where they couldn't go. Folks who were told to stay in their place. Well, turns out our place is everywhere food is valued, everywhere quality matters, everywhere innovation happens." Applause rippled through the barn, but Elder Johnson wasn't finished. "And here's what makes this different from other ventures I've seen come and go. This cooperative doesn't just benefit the Rollins family, though they took the biggest risk. Every participating farm shares in the expanded market access. Every farm contributes according to their capacity and benefits according to their contribution." He turned to James. "That's leadership. Not just climbing the ladder yourself, but building a wider ladder that others can climb too." As Elder Johnson returned to his seat, James stepped forward, momentarily overwhelmed by emotion. He glanced toward the section where Charles Piedmont and Richard Hargrove sat, their expressions thoughtful. Since that first contentious meeting, Hargrove had indeed visited the farm, initially awkward but gradually engaging with genuine curiosity about their operation. Today marked his third visit, this time bringing potential investors interested in supporting the cooperative's expansion. "Thank you all for joining us today," James began. "This cooperative represents more than just a business model. It's a testament to what becomes possible when we challenge assumptions about who belongs in which spaces." He continued, his voice strengthening. "When we first decided to purchase an aircraft, we were thinking primarily of our own operations needs. But throughout that process, we were reminded, sometimes painfully, of the persistent barriers that exist not just in aviation or agriculture, but across our society." James glanced at his daughter, drawing strength from her presence. "Those barriers aren't accidents. They're the result of systems designed to limit access, to preserve advantage for some at the expense of others. Systems that whisper, 'That's not for people like you.'" His gaze swept across the gathering. "But here's what history has taught us. Every time someone says, 'That's not for people like you,' that's precisely the moment to ask, 'Why not?' And then to proceed anyway." The crowd murmured in agreement, many nodding with recognition of this shared experience. "The jet we purchased isn't a luxury," James continued. "It's infrastructure that allows us to compete in a market that has historically excluded farms like ours. It's technology that turns geographical disadvantage into opportunity. It's a tool that helps level a playing field that has been tilted against us for generations." He motioned toward the cooperative display. "And by sharing this infrastructure through our cooperative model, we multiply its impact. A single farm might not be able to justify such an investment. Together, we make it not just viable but transformative." As James spoke, he noticed a subtle shift in Hargrove's demeanor, a dawning recognition, perhaps, of how his initial assumptions had been shaped by systems larger than himself. "In the coming year, we plan to expand this model," James announced. "We're developing partnerships with historically black colleges and universities to create internship programs. We're establishing a fund to help the next generation of black agricultural entrepreneurs access the capital and technology they need. And we're documenting everything we learn, creating a blueprint that other farming communities can adapt to their own needs." He paused, looking out at the faces before him, some familiar, some not, some who shared his experiences, others who could only begin to understand them. "This isn't just about producing food or generating profit, though we do both well," he concluded. "It's about transforming systems by creating alternatives within them. It's about demonstrating that innovation often comes from those who have had to navigate obstacles. And most importantly, it's about ensuring that the future of agriculture includes all of us, our knowledge, our traditions, our creativity, and our dreams." The applause that followed was thunderous, filling the barn with affirmation and possibility. As the formal presentation concluded and guests mingled, James found himself approached by Charles Piedmont. The older man's expression was contemplative. "Remarkable operation you've built here, James," he said, genuine respect in his voice. "And what you're doing with that jet, it's not what I expected, but it makes profound business sense." James nodded. Sometimes the most practical solutions come from those who've had to think differently. "I'd like to discuss something with you," Piedmont continued. "We've been considering ways to diversify our client base, to reach industries and communities we've traditionally overlooked. Your experience, both with the aircraft and with building this cooperative, offers valuable insights." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Would you consider joining our advisory board? We need perspectives that challenge our assumptions, that help us see beyond our blind spots." The invitation hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement, however indirect, of the limitations in Piedmont's organizational culture, and a step, however small, toward addressing them. James considered the request, aware of its implications. Taking on such a role would mean additional demands on his limited time. It would mean navigating spaces not designed with him in mind. It would mean carrying, once again, the weight of representation. But it would also mean influence, access, a voice at tables where decisions are made that affect communities like his. I'd need to discuss it with my family and partners, James replied, neither accepting nor declining immediately. Our cooperative is still in its early stages and requires significant attention. Piedmont nodded, understanding. Of course. It's just something to consider. As the executive moved away to join another conversation, Maya approached her father, having overheard the exchange. You should do it, she said directly, her expression earnest. Not for them. For us. James studied his daughter, her confidence, her clear vision, her unwavering belief in the possibility of transformation. We'll see, he replied, putting an arm around her shoulders as they looked out over the gathering, a living testament to what becomes possible when barriers are not just recognized but systematically dismantled, when access is not just granted but created, when belonging is not just claimed but embodied. Outside, the sun was setting over Rollins Family Farm, casting long shadows across land that had sustained and been sustained by generations of innovation against the odds. In the distance, a small plane crossed the horizon, not their jet, but a reminder of new pathways being forged, of histories being honored, of futures being written with each passing day. The end.